UX collaboration is a really neat process because I get to see how people approach designing certain elements of a screen. And often I learn a thing or two that I can then implement in the future. On the flip side though, collaboration in UX can often be very difficult because if multiple people have different approaches to how they would design a certain screen, then comes a challenge of figuring out how do we move forward from here? This past week, I've been working with my design team to come up with medium fidelity wireframes for a web app that is designed to help consultants set up availability and pricing so that clients can easily book one-on-one consulting time with them. And for our wireframes, we had 4 user flows that we were designing for. So number 1 is just seeing the home page. So for this, we're just redesigning the landing page. Number 2 is editing a profile that a user has created. Number 3 is being able to change or add availability to a calendar so that a client can book one-on-one consulting time. And then number 4 is being able to connect some sort of external calendar, such as Google or Outlook or something like that. So there's probably different ways that we could have tackled this, but our design team decided to just divvy out the different screens that needed to be designed. And so everyone was kind of working on their own respective screens. And then to make things consistent, we all used the same grid layout, the same wireframing kit so that all of the buttons and typography and neutral colors were all the same throughout. When it came to the actual design work, most of us work full-time jobs, so often we would meet at night around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we would meet in Figma and just collaborate and work on our designs. Because we divvied up all of the screens, there were some screens where multiple people were working on them, but some screens people just kind of worked independently off of them. But we would all come together to agree on the design decisions that each of us had made. I think the hardest part about collaborative work is putting aside ego. So for instance, one of the things that I was responsible for designing was the monthly calendar. And so I designed that in a way that I thought was the best appearance. But there were times where people would have critiques about my designs. And so it would be very tempting for me to get defensive in that scenario and declare why my design was good. But I think it's very important, and something that I'm working on is to be receptive to other people's opinion, especially if multiple people have the same critique about my design, because then that's probably something worth changing if multiple people have the same opinion. On the flip side though, it's also important not to be passive. And if I do have a strong logical reason for why I made a design decision, then I'll make that known in a polite way so that people at least understand the thought process that I had when designing it. Now, it doesn't mean that just because I give some logical reason that people are still going to agree on it. That's often not the case, but it at least allows me to give some explanation for my design process. And I think having the same respect for others when they're talking about their designs and letting them be able to talk through their reasonings for why they did different design decisions. And I think just having that mutual respect for each other when it comes to looking at their designs just makes for a better collaborative experience. I think another important aspect when it comes to collaborative design is to be respectful not only of people's designs, but also be respectful in how they design them. And what I mean by this is I use auto layout very heavily in my designs. And that's just the way that I learned with the Figma masterclass that I took somewhat recently. And I do that, well, mainly as a challenge to myself to see if I can do it. But two, I feel like it probably will help developers out better if things are set up in auto layout, since auto layout is just is fairly synonymous with CSS Flexbox. So that's how I go about doing things. But for other people, especially for wireframes, they don't do that, right? So they just move things around freely, and it makes it much easier to brainstorm when you're able to do that. And so for me, if someone needs help with a with their designs, it can be tempting for me to want to auto layout things, but I think it's important to be respectful in how they are approaching their design. And so, if someone needed help with a certain aspect of a screen, I would just move things around freely, just like they did, and suggest changes, and we would kind of go from there. And I know that my process can often piss people off because when everything is in auto layout, you can't move things around freely. And so for people who like to be able to just quickly switch things around, I could tell that some of the designs that I did were making people maybe not upset, but a little bit irritated that they couldn't move things around easily. So I think it's a difficult process to try to figure out how to approach a cohesive way that people design. I don't think that is probably even realistic, but I think just having the respect for how people design their screens and just trying to sort of adopt their process when it comes to editing their designs. And when it comes to editing other people's designs, at least practice that I've adopted is to, one, either ask if I can do it because it is a design that they've worked on, or I'll make a copy of the frame and I'll make the changes and then I'll annotate it and then ask for their thoughts. And I actually kind of like the second method better because then they can sort of see the thought process of what I did. And other people did that for my screens as well. They copied and then they did their revisions and then sort of annotated on what they did. And I actually kind of like that process versus always having to ask permission. So that's something that I feel like helps with efficiency, with collaboration. So it took 2 to 3 days to finish the first round of wireframes. And so at this point, we're waiting for them to be approved by a design mentor. If it's not approved, then we just have to go back and make revisions. But if it is approved, then it'll get shipped off to the client, where the client will give their feedback. And if they have feedback, we'll make revisions. If it's approved, then we'll move on to the style guide and we'll work on that so that we have all of the brand colors and typography and other assets that we would need to have a consistent design in the hi-fi screens. I will say the pace of this Avocademy Jumpstart program is very fast. I would say that I probably work at least 2 hours every weekday night working on some sort of design related assignment for this boot camp. So it's definitely a time investment, but I am learning a lot, especially sort of the softer skills such as collaboration, and that's been a really cool process. So I'm looking forward to see just sort of how this progresses. And if you want to follow my journey when the next video becomes available, you can check that out here, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you can stay up to date with my journey as I become a UX designer. And until next time, I will see you in the next video. Take care.